Considering all the digital options that are out there, the Kemper, the Tone X, the Helix, the Quad Cortex, so on and so forth, why should we still bother with a big heavy tube amp like the Vox AC30? Well, let's talk about it. First off, let's start with the specs of the Vox AC30. The Vox AC30 is obviously a 30-watt amplifier. It has 4 EL34 power tubes, 3 12AX7 preamp tubes, an effects loop, 4 inputs, tremolo and reverb. It is a 2x12 amplifier with either greenbacks or AlNiCo blue. It has the external cab output and extension output, and it weighs about 70 pounds. When it comes to the AC30, volume is always a concern. 5 years ago, during the beginning of the pandemic, I did a video where I showed people how to use EQ and compression and use your AC15 at lower volumes. Although that was the AC15, it does apply for the AC30. If you want to watch that, I'm going to have that in the cards. Or if you look in the video description, it's going to be there too. Now, with that said, you can always use something in the effects loop, either a volume pedal, something like the JHS little black box, I think it's called. I'm going to write it over here. I know it's a little longer than that, but JHS has something for that. There are people that use pedals that have a master volume on it where you can actually attenuate the volume. So there are ways to use the AC30. It might be a big amp. You might want to have something more like a practice amp, but the AC30 with the master volume plus the effects loop, you can definitely tame the beast for home use. Now, because of the concern with volume, a lot of people say, well, maybe the AC30 is too much of an amp. Perhaps I should go with the AC15. And that's a great debate. However, much too long for this video. So if you want to watch that, I'm going to have something else in the card. I know I'm plugging the cards here, but I am making a lot of content around the AC30 and I can't cram this all into one review. So I'm separating some of the bigger subjects into separate videos. So if you want to know the difference between the AC15 and the AC30, watch that or look in the video description. If you're still on the fence about getting yourself an AC30 and you have a Kemper or a Tone X, I invite you to look in the video description. I have a link for some free content for you. So I went through clean tones, edge of breakup, completely overdriven, normal, and top boost, as well as a few pedals. So just grab the pack, try it out, and let me know in the video description if you think the Vox AC30 is a good fit with your style. If you were to buy an AC30 today, the odds are you're going to have either Greenbacks or AlNiCo Blue in your AC30. The difference in price is significant. In the US, it is about a $700 difference between buying one with the AlNiCo Blue and one with the Greenback. So the AlNiCo Blue are the most expensive option. Here in Canada, it's about $1,000 in difference between the greens and the blues. If you were to get an AC30 with the greens and swap out and buy brand new AlNiCo Blues from Celestion, you would save roughly $200 to $300 off the initial cost when you buy it directly into the amp, which is really weird to me. So AlNiCo Blue, a lot of people think it's superior. In my opinion, it's not superior, it's different. It depends on what you want to do. If you want to have that classic 60s tone, the AlNiCo Blue is definitely great for that. However, if you play more modern music with more distorted tone, more fuzz, you might find that the AlNiCo Blue doesn't sound as pleasant as the Greenbacks. The one speaker no one seems to really consider when upgrading is the V30. Now, I personally love the V30 with a Vox. It's a more modern sound, especially if you use fuzz or distortion. So what we're going to do now, just to help you decide on which one would be the best for you, we're going to listen to the Blue, the Greenback, and the V30 in a shootout. I'm going to splice up the video so that way there's like no weird cuts or big delays between audio example. It's going to be one playthrough and you're going to get to hear all three speakers, and that way it can give you an idea which one would be the best option for you. When it comes to buying a used AC30, you might be thinking to yourself, I'm going to save some money, which could be the truth, but they are retaining their value on the used market. There's different versions of the AC30. So you have the early 2000 models where a lot of people are willing to spend a lot of money for those. You have some hand-wired models. There's some special anniversary. There's a version that I had, which was the CC1. That one was a complete flop just because people weren't happy with the single 112. I personally enjoyed it. It's a matter of taste. Eventually, Vox came out with another version of that same kind of concept. It's just called the AC30 C1. I think you can still purchase that one. There are different speakers that are put in there. Some of them are good. Some of them are less desirable, like the Wharfdales. Some of them have special toggle switches on the panel and on the back of the amp to change the biasing, add some brilliance, link the channel inputs together. So do your homework, look at that, see if it's worth it for you to get a used one, or just get the one like I have over here, which is a more modern, doesn't have any of the bells and whistles. Comes with either the Greenbacks or the AlNiCo Blue, and they sound great just as they are. So do keep that in mind if you're going the used route. So if you're like myself, you believe everything that you read on Facebook groups and forums, you're going to know that the Vox and Fuzz pedals is the worst mix in the world. They just can't do it, right? Obviously, I'm being sarcastic here because I've read that so many times. I've heard that from people that have never even played a Vox, and I'm thinking, I have hundreds of videos right here at TL Toneworks where I demo different Vox amps with a ton of fuzz pedals, and it just really is a question of people not knowing the following. You need that master volume up, at least at noon or more, and you need to use the normal channel. If you have the master volume down and you use the top boost channel, you reduce the dynamics greatly. That is not a great sound unless that's what you're looking for, but personally, as a fuzz junkie, I much prefer the normal channel and cranking up the master volume. That way the fuzz can do what it does best. If you need proof of that, I'm gonna have a link right here where I did that with the AC15 about 5 or 6 years ago. Really demonstrated that concept. You can take my word or watch the video. I also am doing 2 videos with this AC30 and some classic fuzz and some more modern fuzz. So if you want to watch that, I'm going to link that in the description of the video as soon as it's available, which should be soon. So yeah, Vox and fuzz, great combination. Just don't trust everything you read online. Go listen to videos and hear it for yourself. Another important question people ask: is the AC30 a good pedal platform? Some people hate the term, some people hate the ideology behind a pedal platform, but here's the truth. A pedal platform is basically an amp that when you plug in a pedal, The pedal sounds like it's supposed to. If you plug in 10 overdrives that are significantly different from one another and they all sound the same, perhaps your amplifier is not that great of a pedal platform. The great thing with a Vox type amp, especially the AC30, whatever you plug into it has its own identity, whether it's the guitar, an overdrive, a distortion, a fuzz, chorus, whatever it may be. If you need proof of that, just look at Brian May, look at guys from Queen, Dashboard Confessional. I mean, there's a bunch of bands out there that use Vox amp. Jimmy Eat World, just remembered, they used to play them for quite a long time. So they are great with pedals. You don't have to worry about it. There's a lot of videos on YouTube of Vox players using different pedals. If you've watched any of my videos on my channel, I do a lot of demos with pedals. If they all sounded the same, I would have heard about it by now after 6 years. And people always love how the Vox AC15 really handles pedals, and the AC30 is no different. So yeah, it is a great pedal platform. Just don't take my word on it. Go read up on who uses AC30s, and you're going to get a really great idea of what a tone monster this amp can be. So we covered a lot of ground, a lot of audio examples, but it's now time to talk about the pros. There's quite a few things I love about the AC30, and there's some cons as well. Some stuff that personally I don't like, or things that I think other players might want to consider if they want to get this amplifier. So first off, there's a master volume on there, meaning that if you play at home, you should be able to get a decent volume for home. Really depends if you have paper thin walls. That could be an issue unless you use the effects loop in the way I mentioned before, where you either get a volume pedal, a pedal that has a volume knob on it. That way you can get it set. Does it sound as great as a very good practice amp? Maybe not. It is a tube amp. It does sound better when you start to open it up a bit, but for home use, although it's big and scary and it can be loud, it can still be used for home use. It's a great gigging amp. So if you're playing like the smaller venues where there's no microphone for the amp, the PA is exclusively for the vocals, you need to be heard. You're never not going to be heard with this. If you have a band where the drummer is so loud that you can't hear yourself, get yourself a new drummer. If the band is too loud and you can't hear yourself with the AC30, you have a really, really loud band. You need to have a talk with your bandmates. These things scream. They sound great in the studio. They will cover everything you need. They're a great pedal platform. There's an effects loop, which you don't get with the AC15, which really sucks, but at least you have it on here. And there's a switch to bypass it, so if you don't need to use it, you don't need to have it in the circuitry. Having two speakers means that if you're on stage, and if you've ever played on stage, you know this, a single 112 or smaller speakers, the moment you move to the side, it's projecting like a laser beam, and all of a sudden you can't hear yourself. So you have to kind of walk in front of the amp to hear it properly. With two speakers, it disperses the sound far greater than just a single 12. So that's a great option with these two. The overdrive in there sounds great. There's ample headroom, so you don't have to worry about like capping out really early. If you need like spanky clean, you can get this at extremely loud volumes. And I find that the distortion in the AC30 is even better than the one in the AC15. The one in the AC15 is really brittle, while this one here is rich and full, which I don't know if it has to do with the power tubes. I don't know anything about electronics, but those are the pros. Great sounding for distortion and clean. Another thing is the tremolo. Sounds really good in the Vox type amps. And the reverb has a tone, so if you don't want the tone to be too bright and kind of like engulf the whole guitar tone, you need it to sit behind, you can cut some of that high end and get it to sit behind your guitar signal. So all in all, those are like things that make me really appreciate the AC30. Okay, so here's my list of cons. It's not super long, but there are things you probably want to consider. So I did start off saying, if you have a digital modeler or something like the Helix or the HX Stomp, something along those lines, why would you bother with a super heavy tube amp? Right? And that is part of the cons. It's 70 something, like almost 71 pounds for the Greenback version. If you go with the AlNiCo Blue, the bigger magnets, it's adding a few pounds on top. It's not a grab and go amp. If you are commuting by bus or any public transit, that's a pain in the ass to bring around for gigs. If you have a small car, putting that on your back seat or in the trunk or boot of your car, if you don't have a whole lot of room, that could be a problem. I mean, it is a fairly big combo amp. Consideration number one is how big it is, how heavy it is. Obviously, there's not much that can be done to reduce the weight, but for someone who gigs regularly and doesn't want to bring a big clunky amp, is it worth it? Is the tone worth it? That's up to you to debate, but it is something that I consider. I mean, I'm a big guy. I don't need a gym membership to get that. Some people might, but you know, I got the gray in my hair. I'm getting older, got some back issues, and my knees are starting to hurt. And I grab this thing and I'm like, I hope the car is not that far away because I don't want to be walking with this in my hand for a half hour. I imagine someone using public transit having to bring that. Ooh, not a fun time. The other point that bugs me about this is the steep upcharge, right? We're talking, as I said earlier, in the States, the difference between the Greenback and the AlNiCo Blue is $700. Here in Canada, we're talking about $1,000 for different speakers that just sound different. They're not better, they're just different. Why the upcharge? I don't know. And on top of that, if you consider what they cost brand new, if you were to get a pair of AlNiCo Blue, they're still charging you almost $300 more just to have them installed in the amp, which there's a disconnect there for me. I'm not sure why they're charging you even more for the AlNiCo Blue versus the Greenback. There's the math doesn't math for me, but it's been that way for a long time and I don't see it changing. So if you're really in the market for a Vox AC30 with the AlNiCo Blue, you're spending way more money. Is it worth it? I don't know. I'm not you. I don't know what you're into. Personally, I wouldn't buy one with the AlNiCo Blue. I'd get them later. I'd get them used. Or maybe I would trade something for them, but I would never pay that amount for the AlNiCo Blue. Plus, my third point is how much these amps cost now. When I got my AC15 in 2017, I think I paid about $800 total with the taxes and everything. Right now, those amps are far more expensive than they were. I don't know if they're double, but they're close to double. Same thing happened with the AC30. It's shot up in price. I remember being able to get them used for about $800. I don't know what happened, but they just skyrocketed. And we're not talking like boutique, made in the UK Vox AC30. They are made overseas. They're mass produced. So I'm not sure why the cost is so steep. It's what the market is now. Of course, if you want to go a different route, you were like, I'm not going to get an AC30. I want to get something that sounds like an AC30. I don't want to pay that price. You're looking at Matchless, you're looking at Bad Cat, and that price has just doubled. So I guess Vox is still somewhat the affordable option to get the authentic Vox sound. But, you know, it is expensive. So those are the three things: the cost of the speakers, the weight of the amplifier, and the cost if you want to buy one brand new versus the price it was just a few years ago. So let me know what you think of my pros and cons. Maybe you have your own list. Put it in the comments section. I read everything and I comment. So have at it, have fun, and I'm gonna go on to the next part, which is gonna be who it's for. So who is this amp for? Someone who plays gigs regularly. We're talking about gigs where there's no microphone, gigs that might vary from very, very small venues to larger stages, very adaptable amp. So if you need more volume from the amp because you don't have a PA that's micing you, something like an AC15 might not cut it. So the AC30 would be great. If you need to hear yourself properly, you don't have in-ears or whatever, two 12-inch speakers blowing air at you is going to be heard. If you only have a single 12-inch moving around, you can kind of lose the guitar sound. You're going to panic a bit because you can't hear yourself. With 212, at least, you're in the ballpark. If you're someone who needs the effects loop, you need all the bells and whistles, like you need the tone on the reverb, you need the different inputs depending on different guitars, different pedal boards, etc., then you're probably the person for this. But you also have to consider that you have to be a fan of the Vox sound to begin with. If you get this and you expect to make it sound like a Fender Twin or like some Marshall JCM 100, that's not what this amp does. You also have to consider the pedals that you use. Let's say you have pedals that were tailored for a Fender Deluxe reverb. You end up on here, it might not sound the same to you. And it might be a pleasant difference, or it might be something where you're like, I need to change all my pedals. So my advice to you would be Go to the nearest music store that has these amps, bring your guitars, bring your pedals, try them at the store, see if you like the sound. That's really my top advice. So if you're the kind of player that needs a bigger amp, maybe you need this at rehearsal because your drummer's a caveman and can't play with dynamics. It's just like, raw, me drummer. If you're stuck with that, I've been in that position. It's great. You always need to upgrade to a louder amp. And eventually you end up kicking them out and getting a great drummer, and then you're too loud. Been there, done that. Fun. So yeah, consider that. If you gig regularly, you need the volume, you need the effects loop, and you love the Vox tone, this is for you. So yeah, let's move on to the next point. I'm going to give you my thoughts on the AC30, my experience with it. There's a good reason why I went with the AC15 when I initially wanted to have like a Vox. I was like really determined to get a Vox amplifier. I had the AC30 a few years before, but I wasn't super convinced. Eventually, I was like, no, that's definitely the guitar sound I want. I want a Tele through a Vox, but which one? I had the AC10, the AC15, and the AC30 in my sight. I did try the AC30. I liked it. I didn't love it though. I liked it, but there was something magical about the AC15, and that's what I went with. If I had bought the AC30 initially, I probably would have never considered the AC15 or any of the other AC amps from that line. The FX loop is a great option. The distortion in it, if you don't use pedals and you just want to crank up the amplifier and get all the saturation there, it's a great tone. But personally, I live in that edge-of-breakup scenario where I can get some clean tone and I can just use some kind of boost just to get the amp into overdrive. I don't like the sound of the AC15 cranked all the way, but I love that sound out of the AC30. Which one's better? Which one is the best amp? It's whatever you have on hand. So if you start with the AC30, you don't need to think about upgrading. If you get yourself an AC15 and that's not your thing, you're going to have to upgrade to an AC30. So I think in a sense, the AC30 for the gigging musician, for the studio musician, is actually the better option. Am I going to switch and sell my AC15 for the AC30? No way. No way. I love my AC15 and I took the time to swap out the Greenback for a WGS black and blue. I like it, but I don't love it. I may switch out for a V30 in the near future because I really like the sound of a more modern Vox with distortion and fuzz. So yeah, all in all, it's a great experience. If I had started with the AC30, I would be content. I wouldn't even be looking for another amp. But because I started with the AC15, I feel the same way. I don't feel a need to upgrade. But if you're in the market for that, take everything I just said today into consideration. My best advice to you is go to a music store, try one out. If you can bring it to a gig or rehearsal, even better. It sounds a certain way at the store, but it sounds completely different in a band context or in a studio for that matter. So let me know your thoughts. In the meantime, if you want to watch more Vox content, just click on the video appearing on screen now, and I'm going to see you in the next one. Cheers.